those bones. I've chewed that, all that riffraff that's in my mind. And you sift down to like, okay, all right, I'm hearing that, I'm thinking that, I felt that. But really, what is that sort of bedrock of what do I need to do? What today, or what is my priority? Let me let all that stuff filter away. Now what?
Hey, I'm Allison Hare, and welcome to Culture Changers, the podcast that brings you unconventional wisdom by uncommon people. Together, we are shattering old paradigms to reshape our world and inviting you to make your own mark. With the advent of social media, we all have the power to broadcast our point of view, whether or not we've taken the time to really think things through. But what is it like to see life through the lens of an editor and a writer? Someone who can mold and shape the culture through their words and curating ideas into a powerful narrative. My guest today is Anne Alexander. She is a two-time New York Times bestselling author, former editor of Mindful Magazine and National Geographic, among others, brand strategist and founder of the upcoming new medium Soul Candy. A friend had forwarded me Anne's editor's letter to Mindful and said, "Allison, she writes like you." And I could see it too. Her writing was real, it was raw, honest, and she was so insightful. And what I found in our conversation was someone who had spent her life critically thinking and considering points of view around wellness and alternative health and mindfulness, and how to use these tools to navigate finding your own purpose. So this is a juicy episode, so I want you to think of 2 or 3 friends who might be really into new and innovative ideas and leveling up, and share this episode with them right now. And before we jump into our chat, please take a moment to go to the show notes and connect with me on the socials and sign up for my blog at AllisonHare.com. I'd love to hear what you liked about the show and what you'd be interested to hear in the future. Also, if you know of any kick-ass culture changers that are pushing back on the status quo and making the world better in a new way, I want to know them. I want to have them on the show. Text me at 470-242-6311. You can also chat with me in the live chat on this app. Okay, here is my chat with Anne Alexander of Soul Candy. You have an incredible storied background, and I use that punnily, storied background, as a writer, as an editor, as a brand strategist for some of the biggest names out there. And you're going through a really, really big transition to something potentially even better and maybe more in line with who you are. If I'm reading in between the lines here. So please, welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit about your background. I'm so thrilled to have you on.
Well, Allison, thank you very much for having me. Culture Changers is what an incredible platform. I mean, I'm looked at the people that you've had, and I've listened to your podcast, and you're making your mark, and you're helping other people make their mark. So thank you. It's an honor and a delight to be here. And yeah, you wrote, and your friend sort of prompted you to reach out at a really pivotal time. I've been blessed. I mean, I've had an amazing, wonderful career so far. And yeah, I'm going through my own sort of transition of launching my own brand that is, 100% kind of coming from within. And it's called Soul Candy. And it's going to be long form video interviews and podcasts. And yeah, I mean, I've been very, very lucky. I've had a great career. And in some ways, I think Soul Candy will pull together a lot of the different threads that have kind of gone throughout my career. I mean, I started as an editor-in-chief at Natural Health, interviewing Deepak Chopra and Dr. Andrew Weil and Kristen Northrup, and really kind of pushing those boundaries of alternative health and sort of just kind of that, I love going out on the edge of any kind of new frontier in healing, new frontier in psychology. And I just like to talk to the experts that are kind of right there and sort of say, tell me what's going on. And also, what can I, as a user, benefit from that? So yeah, I've been in natural health and prevention. I've been at National Geographic. AOL, AARP. I mean, just like an amazing array of things and places. So yeah, I hope to be able to take some of those skills in terms of, tracking down who knows something that's interesting and has a story to tell, and then kind of peeling back the layers in terms of what can I learn here? What can listeners learn here?
I actually started getting chills because I feel like a kindred spirit happening because I'm like, did I just say that? No, it was Anne. She just said that. And what I think is interesting too, especially in this pivotal time. So obviously we are in the midst of a global pandemic. And one of the things that I've heard from my audience is that they feel like through this time, I, as my audience, I feel like I have changed and evolved, but my work hasn't. And there might be a bigger mark there. And I wonder if that has kind of prompted you to go out in this new frontier. And what I noticed is that that's been around the soul candy idea for 2016. So this must have been ruminating or bubbling in you for a long time. So tell me your thoughts about that evolution.
Well, Allison, you do your homework. Yeah, soul candy actually came to me, and it's almost embarrassing to admit. It came to me like 5 years ago, and it's been bubbling. And I almost think of it almost kind of like a satellite that's kind of like been beaming messages to me, and it's kind of, in some ways, it's been positive because it's sort of like been this sort of thing that I have wanted to pursue. And it's haunted me at times, sort of saying, you're not doing it. You're not moving towards me. What are you doing? And I think, as creative people, sometimes it's almost like there's this, I always think of it almost as like these entities that exist within you. And sometimes I think of them as almost like, remember when I was a long time ago, I was a rower, and we would row on the Potomac, and it would be really dark. And so we would be out on the Potomac River, and there's the national airport there. And so you could see these airplanes lined up, and the airplanes would line up and they would land every 30 seconds. So when you were on the river at night, you could see these airplanes just lining up, light after light after light. And in some ways, I feel like creative people, we're kind of like that. These things are circling, and they have to kind of come in for a landing. So in some ways, soul candy has been out there percolating, and I've chastised myself like, oh my God, you're so slow. What's taking you so long? Come on, get with it. And I also think in some ways, when I had the idea 5 years ago, it just wasn't time. And I look back now and I think, oh man, I had just like acres and oodles of pain to go through in order for me to come out now on this other side and to sort of be almost like encouraging people to say, you can do it, go for it. There's like soul candy is in some ways this sort of voice that says you can do it. You've got something inside of you that you can give birth to. And, I've been doing this for years in some ways. I've written the 2 books that I wrote were on weight loss. And in some ways, weight loss is a metaphor, right? It's like, what do you need to let go of in order for your real self, that self that you see inside of you, to emerge? And so if, I can say, you can read these weight loss books on any level, and you can read it like, oh, it's just a practical manual and I'm going to drop the pounds. But if you look at the books, there's so much in there about inspiration and so much in there about setting an intention about what do you want in your life and how do you then move towards that. So in Soul Candy it's kind of like that. It's dropping all of those behavior patterns that hold us back and moving forward. And, as I talk to people, it's interesting and sort of, at first I was sort of sheepish about it, like, oh, well, I'm launching this thing and it's called Soul Candy and I really wanted to do it for a long time. It's funny how people have said, oh, well, that's funny. I really want to do this thing. And I think that you're right. The pandemic has given people in some ways the time and the space. Many of us are commuting less, so we're sort of thrashing around less. We have a little more time, perhaps. And also there's, of course, sadly, there's the specter of tremendous illness, life-altering, death, which has affected a lot of people. And so we're really kind of at that cutting edge of, well, what are you here to do? Now is the time. And so I've known a lot of people who have used this time to really reflect. in fact, I just was, talking to somebody yesterday, and her husband is quitting his job, and he's taken a severance package, and he's going to focus on what is his passion always been. I was, sort of having a long chat with another young woman, and, we can always kind of, job jump, from one job to the next job to the next job. And she felt like that was always a possibility, but that she had this thing inside her that she needed to examine. So yeah, I think that, oftentimes the prompts come in different formats. What is the thing? It could be a disaster. It could be getting laid off. It could be an illness. It could be a divorce. It could be any number of things that prompt us to listen to those calls that come from within.
So how do you navigate? First of all, I relate to that on so many levels, and I see it. I see it with my audience. I see it just looking around of just people saying, now is the time to make my mark. And I feel like something has been bubbling up for years and years and years. And how do I manifest this into something real? And what's interesting about your Soul Candy is that I looked at your Facebook group. There are like tens of thousands of people that have already liked it. I don't know if it is just something that you had put out there a while ago, or have kind of contributed to, but what form will it take in this new realm? Because you've stepped away from your role as editor of Mindful Magazine, and you will still be a contributing editor, but what form do you foresee it taking for you?
For Soul Candy, gosh, you're so sweet to ask. Thank you so much. I see it taking a couple of formats. So first is going to be long form interviews. I love interviewing people. I mean, I would imagine that's one of the reasons your friend said, "Oh, we're similar." I love interviewing people, and in fact, it's funny. I've held many different jobs, many different companies, and people have often said that going through a job interview with me is not really like any other job interview they've ever had, because I really want to get to that place where I understand, like, who are you? Why are you here? And what are you doing? And, to me, hiring people or working with people, when you're in that sort of like gold vein of tapping into why somebody is here, then the energy that comes up out of them, the energy, the creativity, the like that sort of joy that people bring, whether it's to a job or, a volunteer group or anything, it's just irrepressible, and it's infectious, and it just kind of, it permeates the whole organization. So, figuring out and kind of, tapping into that is so essential. So long form video, just so, you can take the time to let people unfold, is one thing. So long form video and podcasts, because I can anticipate, sometimes it takes a while till you get to that nugget that somebody really can reveal, and people might not have, the whole period of time. So long form video, podcast, which would be kind of a shortened version and a highlight. And then I would love to have practices, because I think I think I'm not like anybody. I'm not dissimilar to other people, but sometimes you have this terrible sense of envy. It's like, what? That person gets to do something, or that person is doing something, or you're hearing about like this amazing thing that this other person is doing, and it's like, well, what's wrong with me? Why am I not doing that? So in some ways, I think it's always a disservice if you don't hand people also the tools. So an essential, like core element of Soul Candy has to be providing people with insights and tools and practices so they can adopt, whatever it is they need to. So, one of the things I love at Mindful, and anywhere I've ever worked, prevention, National Geographic, natural health, has always been providing people with really practical advice. Like, here are 5 things you can do, or here is a meditation that you can do. Because I have found, there are books that have changed my life. There's actually an article that I worked on at Self magazine like 25 years ago that I rely on to this day.
What book is it?
Well, it was actually, It was actually an article about a thing called Morita therapy, and it was like a little tiny trend. It never, I don't think it, I don't know how it, if it took off in the United States or not, but there were three principles to it, and the first one was accept your feelings. And so, just we all talk about it now as mindfulness or emotional awareness or emotional intelligence, but it's really being aware of what are your thoughts, what are your feelings, and just to really be aware of them so you know what's going on with you, and ideally so you might know what's going on in your circle. So accept your feelings. Number two is know your purpose, and your purpose can be like your long vision purpose, or it can just be, what do you need to do today? What is the most important thing that you can accomplish today? And the third thing is do what needs to be done. So you may not feel like making that phone call. You may be petrified of those first few steps that you've got to do, but you've got to do it. It's like Mel Robbins, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, just do it. And so accept your feelings, know your purpose, and do what needs to be done. And it used to be this mantra. I would walk to work when I was living in New York City. I would walk to work for about 2.5 miles. And I would just reflect on it. Like, what are my feelings? What am I thinking? And oftentimes, you learn from the world of mindfulness and you learn through meditation that so often we are being driven by our thoughts and our feelings and our this and our that, and we're being reactive. And it takes a while to sift through, well, okay, I'm thinking this and I'm feeling this, and there's this and there's this and there's this. And as you sift through those different elements, you finally kind of get to, okay, I've gnawed on those bones. I've chewed that, all that riffraff that's in my mind. And you sift down to like, okay, all right, I'm hearing that. I'm thinking that. I felt that. But really, really, what is that sort of bedrock of what do I need to do? What today, or what is my priority? Let me let all that stuff filter away. Now what?
That is profound too. I think that's profound to kind of have to give yourself, to allow yourself the time and space to actually feel and acknowledge your feelings, which I think people are starting to awaken to. Maybe not even, I'm sure in the mindfulness space, that is kind of, that's like 101, right? But in the world, I think there is a little more of an awakening to it. But as you talked, I started to get stuck on, but what if you don't know what your purpose is? And, as you wrote this 15 years ago, 15 years ago, this stuff was crazy. This was like when Gwyneth Paltrow started doing yoga and people started rolling their eyes going, what is this newfangled, who does she think she is? Like, I'm a huge fan of Gwyneth Paltrow and Goop and what they've done. And like she started doing macro, and now everybody's doing like all of the things that people made fun of are what are being adopted right now, as normalized. So as as I'm going through this crazy detour of a question for you, tell me, did you know what your purpose was? And I think what people struggle with now is that people are awakening to the fact that yes, my feelings matter, and maybe I need to give some time and space. And this great pause of the pandemic has allowed people to, there's no running away. But the purpose part is, I think, where people are stuck of, okay, well, I have this hierarchical cultural norm of work for a corporate job, climb the ladder, but that doesn't feel like the way it should be anymore. And now with the internet, you can do anything. You could be a millionaire unboxing videos on YouTube, unboxing crap for kids. So it's there's an interesting time, and I wonder what your thoughts are in this time and finding your purpose, and through all of the work that you've done, not only on yourself, but as an editor, as a curator, as an observer of the world. What guidance would you give someone that's stuck there?
That's another $1 million question. Now I see why you do what you do, because you ask $1 million question after another, and you zeroed in on what is so difficult. And I think, the purpose question, it would be so nice if we all just had one purpose. And, I've often looked at people who they know they want to be a vet, or they know they want to be a doctor. And, they are just like a straight arrow,
path, right?
Boom. And wow, life must be so simple in some ways. It's not hard. It's not to say it's not hard for them, but it must be simple, because one of those sort of areas of massive confusion is clear for them. But I think for the rest of us, I think purpose is something that evolves over time. And I think that it also iterates. And, you described the scenario of somebody, going in a corporate job, and maybe that doesn't feel right. And I think similarly today, there are lots of people who don't go into corporate jobs. And then they're like, well, I can do anything. And so that, they're off on their own creating something. And, both worlds have value, right?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like in some of my experience, I've had tremendous just luck. I've been gifted with working with extraordinary leaders and people who I can learn from and just like glean things. I remember, I've watched people, leaders in meetings, and I just try to absorb, how do they handle things? How do they handle conflict? How does a strong woman give direction without saying, oh, I'm sorry, and could you please do that? It's like, these are extraordinary role models, and you can just absorb this stuff. And similarly, being off and doing something on your own entrepreneurially, you can learn a tremendous things, failing fast and all that other stuff. But there's something beautiful in that kind of combination of learning from others and learning and doing things on your own. But the purpose question, I think that in some ways, as I sort of go through it, I think that there are so many ways to answer that. And one is, I think purpose is an evolution. And, it's almost like my visual for that is almost like when you imagine like somebody sailing, and people don't sail ultimately in a straight course, right? If they want to get somewhere, they tacked one way, then they tacked another way, then they tacked another way, and they tack another way. And it's kind of this zigzaggy way. And when, you look back over your shoulder, you sort of say, oh, look at that. It all makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I've gone from here and I've gone from there and I've gone from there. And I can look at my career and I can say, well, and I'm still in this process of evolution, right? And I look back and I say, well, I like to, solve problems and communicate solutions to people. I like to inspire people. And it's only sort of through looking at my career over time that I can sort of say, well, that's a thread that runs through it. So I think, in fact, I was just talking to this young woman the other day, and she was struggling with like, well, what is her purpose? And I think sometimes what happens is we're so solutions oriented.
Mm-hmm.
We want the answer before we attempt to do the thing towards it. And oftentimes I think what has to happen is the answer has to bubble up. We have to give it time in order for the answer to reveal itself. One of the best books I think ever written it's like The Way of the Artist. I'm going back now and I'm reading all these classic books.
Which one is that one? Is it the art? Who wrote that? Do you know?
I believe it's Julie Cameron, and it's The Artist's Way.
I think you're right. Yeah.
And she talks about I think it's worth just reading, in fact, just like the first third of the book, because what she talks about is this idea of getting up in the morning and writing freehand 3 pages, no editing,
yes,
and it's almost like you just have to allow all of that stuff to come up. And, I've been journaling for umpteen years. And I think sometimes, you can sit there and say, well, I'm just going to reflect on it. But the process of writing it down and journaling it is marvelous, because over time, you see what your themes are. You're able to see, oh, I keep coming back to that, or that keeps holding some interest for me, some energy for me. Oh, let me go towards that, rather than kind of day after day mulling and saying, well, what's my purpose? What's my purpose? What's my purpose? You almost have to allow the feelings inside you to come to the surface, to sort of say, this is what I'm drawn towards. This feels right. This feels right. And it consistently feels right. And it may be that you give yourself some time to sort of say, my purpose right now is to figure out my purpose. So I'm going to give myself 1 month, 3 months, 6 months to just be dedicated to that. And I'm going to get up, and then you kind of allow yourself to know that, because, we grow up and we ask children these ridiculous questions. Well, what do you want to be when you grow up? Like, you like how is some kid going to know that? Better to say, what do you enjoy doing? Or what problem do you want to solve? Or what do you like to do? What draws you towards it? And then, again, I'm like such a hack for these old books, but I remember reading when I was in college, I think it was like what color is your parachute? And I remember one of the exercises, it was write down what you're good at, write down what you enjoy doing. And if you develop a list of these are the things that I enjoy doing, they're the things that are sort of almost effortless for you. It's like, well, I love, reading, catalogs for things like Yogaville and Kripalu and Omega, because I'm always interested in, well, who's talking about what? And that's the thing I'm drawn to. I can sit there and watch Iyanla fix my life for hours because it's like, what is like that? The magic of her talking to people is extraordinary. So watch those things. And even if they seem not related to your career, just watch them, because this is where your energy, this is where your spirit is making itself evident.
This is so good. I'm so excited.
Well, it's just true, right? And I think that we all struggle with it, right? We all struggle. And I think when we're not struggling is almost when we've gotten a little dead or a little, we're too far in our comfort zone.
I think that tension too is where paying attention makes a huge difference of that frustration or cognitive dissonance. And that's kind of where we are as a collective society. And right. I'm really curious about your writing practices. I love writers. I love people who can write and use the word as a way to communicate. And I was so humbled and excited to have Seth Godin on this podcast. And
wow,
we talked about the practice of writing every day. And one of the, I don't know who said this, but somebody did say this. And I wonder if you relate to this as well. But there's a line that says, I don't know what I think until I write it down.
Yes.
And I feel that way.
Yes. And many people have said that. And it's so true. And it's so true. And I think the process of journaling also gives you a chance to write it and to come back to it tomorrow. And sometimes I don't even read the things I read the next day, but I find that I'm an editor, right? So there's a refinement, particularly if an idea really holds merit. I can find sometimes I can just chew on something. Like if I'm bothered by something, or if there's an event or something has happened that really kind of gets under my skin, sometimes journaling about it for a couple of days, sometimes we gnaw on these bones, right? Sometimes there's something that bothers us. And sometimes writing it, or what I find, I'm a very visual person. So sometimes I will draw the situation and I will sort of, draw, oh, this is me in relation perhaps to this other person, or this is me in relation to how I'm thinking about things that, I can see, like I've got this miner's lamp, and my miner's lamp is just pointing to the past, or I'm just pointing to like the negativity of like, I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm not pointing upwards and saying, well, I don't know what I'm doing, but that's a whole world of possibility out there. So yeah, I think, however, whether it's the words that come to you that sort of help you refine and define, or if you're a visual person, I think that process of reflecting and I'm going to be, I want to be clear. There's some areas here where, people can just stew in their own stuff for a long time. And I think where that awareness becomes important. I remember I got divorced, and boy, did I gnaw on that bone for a long time. Why did we get divorced? What did I do? What did he do? Where did we go wrong? Blah, blah, blah. And I needed to, and I needed to process that. But there came a time when I would sit down in the morning and I became aware that I had choices. And it was almost like I was sitting down in my own, like I was sitting down in my chair, my kind of reflection, contemplation chair. and I had choices. I could go into the Netflix of the past. It was like my visual my visual thinking, like I'm sure everybody's visual thinking is so, you know, like alive, right? So I was sitting down, I was like in my own Netflix of my brain. And it was like, well, am I going to go in the Netflix of the past and replay things? And I got kind of sick of my own ruminations. And it was like I could see my patterns were such that I was just gnawing on those things. And it was like
But is that
time.
like the knowledge of feeling like a victim and like taking control of that? Or do you think that's completely separate?
I just got sick of myself. I just got sick
Okay,
of,
I get that.
and I was like, ugh, really, 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 I'm just going to sit here and think about this again. And I just was like, I got to think new stuff. I've done it, and I've just got to okay, been there, done that. It is time. It's time to get to doing something new. And anyway, so it's, I guess, what am I saying? Being aware of what you're thinking and being aware, well, am I just going back to the well of those old thoughts, or am I kind of trying to give myself the opportunity to refresh and start something new?
So I'm curious about this too, because I feel an attraction, or at least a proclivity towards new ideas, to new perspectives, and I'm wondering, what type of home were you raised in that kind of drew you there, or where in your life did you start to realize that there was another way that was not maybe the traditional way? Like where did your curiosity move? Where was that divergence?
You are really good at asking these questions. I
You're
am
so sweet.
so impressed. In fact, as you were saying that, I was like, I should be recording this for myself so that I
I
can pick
promise
up
you it will
pointers.
be on the podcast. You can have access to it forever.
No, I'm very, very impressed. Gosh, it's so flattering too. Wow, what a flattering question. My goodness.
Well,
You
you
know,
wonder about like growing up in a home. Some people's homes are culturally, I assume, growing up in I grew up in a home that was traditional and, work for a job, get the gold watch, you only stay at one job, that kind of thing. And that's kind of what society dictated. And now we know it's completely different. But I wonder where did that crossroads come for you? Because it's obvious that you have spent your entire life chasing a new perspective and sharing and spotlighting a new perspective, new ways, new ideas, ways to be healthier with a wellness perspective, or through a wellness lens of I think you have something called a healthy mind, there's some tagline that you have. What is it called?
I think with mindful, it was well, making time for what matters, but it was also like healthy mind, healthy something. Isn't that
Yeah.
terrible? I can't remember it.
I thought it was yours, but whatever. It's
No.
obviously very good. But yeah, I think that if everything can start with a healthy mind, I think people, look at, can I just get skinny? Can I just look skinny? Can I, or even if that's, can I just get through today?
Right.
And what does that mean? So I think as mental health is being normalized a little more, where did that crossroads come for you?
That's a great question. And on the one hand, gee, I think we all grow up with a mixture, I would assume, of kind of like the positives and the negatives. And I feel like on the positive side of kind of what was I exposed to, my mother was amazing, in many, many ways. I always think of like, she gave me the adventure gene, and in some ways the ambition gene. And, she just told extraordinary stories when I was a kid, of just doing amazing things. I won't, we grew up hearing stories about how she and her, best friend, they were on vacation in this sort of like, they were just these two average young women, from New York. They were going on a week's vacation, and this extraordinarily beautiful yacht pulled up, and these guys said, "Hey, would you like to go, see the yacht?" They were like, "Well, yeah, sure. Why not?" And the next thing they knew, these guys it was a winter, they were wintering the boat, meaning they had to like get it from one place to the next. And they were going to go on like a 6-week cruise that in order to transport this beautiful yacht that turns out it was from the Forbes family. There was just these young guys. That was their job to do it. And they said, hey, would you like to go with us? And my mother said yes. And she, and this was in like, I must have been in the 40s. And so that was the story of the Black Duck. And it was this Forbes yacht, and she got on it, and they went from Block Island, and she called her boss in New York. She worked at J. Walter Thompson in advertising, and said, would you mind if I extended my vacation from like a week to 2 weeks? Eventually, she extended her vacation for like 6 or 8 weeks. She wound up going from Block Island all the way up to Nova Scotia. And just having that sense of adventure, that sense of possibility, that sense that, and I've taught my kids it, and they could say it in a chorus: when opportunity knocks, answer the door with enthusiasm. When opportunity knocks, say yes, because it's like, right? Like life is what you make it. My mother had these wonderful phrases, life is the sum of experiences. So you've got to go out and experience. And, growing up kind of with that sort of that wind at your back, like just give it a try. I loved her phrase, the other phrase, I'll tell you all of them, but there are just another one that I thought was brilliant. And I've said it many, many times since then. It's like, moving vans go both ways. And it's like, you can try things. Maybe they will work out. Maybe they won't, but just try, so there was that. And just this wondrous sense of, the world has, these amazing things to offer. So just go out and experience them. And, and I just, and there was that. And then also I just felt like, the world, I just wanted to go try things, and there were other sort of on the negative sides. I grew up in another, on the other hand, I grew up in a house, there was a lot of yelling and awful things that happened. And I loved being outside of my house as well, because you never knew when a big argument was going to break out. So I was the kid who joined every single club. I was president of my class. I was on the rowing team, and I loved being outside of my home because I wasn't going to get yelled at. Nobody else was going to get yelled at. And it was a great way to just expose myself to things. So, it wasn't all roses, but it wasn't all bad either,
I love your mother. She sounds awesome.
She was pretty awesome. She had some really fantastic aspects to her. She could also be pretty terrifying as well.
Right.
But yeah.
I love all those stories too. I think what's interesting is as you're kind of unfolding this story, I think about something that is deeply, deeply embedded in me of what is my legacy going to be. And I see the legacy being passed through you, being passed through your kids to, and also through your work. And I'm wondering, as you unfold Soul Candy, what is your hope for impact? So you're doing these long form interviews, you're doing these podcasts, you want to unfold. It sounds like you want to share the real truth, the essence of what makes people amazing, what makes people tick, what makes people joyful, and have that infectiousness. What is your hope for impact?
It's exactly that. You've said it so beautifully. I mean, my hope, have you ever had those podcasts where you listen to them? Gosh, I'm getting goosebumps. Where you listen to them and then you just share them and you think,
Yes.
oh, this changed my life. Or,
Yes.
or you then are prompted to pick up a book by that person and you think, oh, how could I have ever lived without having read this? I'm reading a book right now and it's like 20 years old and it's on boundaries and it's by Dr. Harvey Chad or something or other. And it's like, how could I have ever lived without knowing these definitions of boundaries? And so in some ways, it's kind of like that. I want it to be this magnet where people come and they're drawn and they take whatever message they kind of needed to hear at that moment. And then they just go forth. And that hopefully they come back and get something else and share it with their friends. But, it's just to be a watering hole where, amazing sort of things and inspiration transpires. that's sort of my desire. That's my gift. I would love to be able to put something out there like that, that's free, that's accessible, that's inspiring, and just helps people illuminate, just one step, one step, one step. Because, I think so often we feel so isolated. One of the reasons I also started Soul Candy, and purely really the reason, was I was in a very kind of desperate time in my life, and I felt very scared. I really felt scared, struggling, and alone. And I remember thinking, I can't be the only person who feels this way. I can't be the only person in this space of darkness. And I've had the tremendous luck of being able to bring all these resources together. What if I could bring resources together that could help people who are in that kind of scared, struggling, and alone feeling, and sort of just to be able to radiate, you're not alone, that there is one more step, one more step, one more step that you can take. That's my gift. And that's what I'd like to give.
I think the one more step thing, I think that's where people get tripped up, because people get tripped up with, okay, I have the end goal in mind. How do I cram everything I can? But all it is one step. Would you agree?
Totally, 1,000,000,000% agree. And it's one step, one step, one step. And the beauty of one step is you can take that step, and then you can pause and you can reflect and sort of say, what now? What feels right now? What feels most right now? And, again, it's like, that's how you then just tick tack your way across, and yeah. And that we're made for relationship, we're made to be able to connect with others. And sometimes the way you connect with others is just listening and hearing another voice that sort of says, yeah, I've been there, or I've been somewhere similar, and just try this, just try this.
I think that is the beauty of podcasting, because it is so intimate. You start to develop a relationship with the host or with the guest, and you start to hear your story, or you start to hear your story unfold somewhere else. And one of the North Stars, at least for me, has always been, if I'm in a funk, if I'm in a place, I'm always like, okay, if I'm feeling this way, I'm not the only one. How do I broadcast this out? And, kind of shine a light, or at least
Yes.
Extend a branch to somebody that it's going to be okay. And,
Yes.
And you're not alone.
Yes, 100%. And that you can extend the branch, and you can also validate that these dark places exist for all of us. Because I think oftentimes, we for whatever reason, we want to project, oh, everything's all bright and shiny. Yes, things are working out wonderfully. Look how great everything is. And, everything's not always great, and to be able to acknowledge that and to say, yeah, there are times where, I feel lonely, I'm struggling, I'm utterly at wit's end. And, that not just like, oh, this too shall pass, but this is how I've dealt with it. And I feel like it's so important to be able to share that and to acknowledge it, because otherwise we're all just we're projecting this sort of fakey, hey, everything's great. Everything's great. How great is it for you? And that we're perpetuating this myth that everything is great, and everything's not great.
No.
All the time.
I think even now too, one of the reasons why the immediate thought I had when my girlfriend sent me your message and said she writes like you, and coming from Mindful Magazine, something I've never read before. And one of the things that I personally struggle with, and I think that my podcast is really just one long therapy session for myself of just stuff I'm curious about and interested in, and interesting problems I'd love to help solve with some people that are doing really incredible things in this space. And so a couple of years ago, I decided I'm going to learn transcendental meditation. So I spent all this money and kind of did this practice, and I have my mantra or my word, and And I hated it. I hated every minute. Like I would sit for 20 minutes and I felt like I was going insane. And so for somebody that's been in the space of mindfulness of, you've been a yoga instructor in the past, at least according to
Yep.
LinkedIn. So I feel like, that which you resist persists, that
Right.
this is probably an area that I need to spend time in because I don't, other than, I follow my breath for 10 breaths in the morning. What would be your advice for me and other people who may struggle with chilling the F out?
Yeah. Well, number one is listen to yourself and I love the fact that you tried TM and then it didn't work. And that's the most important thing that you can listen to is it didn't work for you. And, I
Maybe
think
not
that,
in this time. Maybe some other
well,
time it would. Who knows?
it's kind of like yoga, right? There are so many different kinds of yoga and so many different kinds of yoga teachers. It's almost like going and buying shoes. And if you tried on one pair of shoes and you're like, wait, I don't like shoes. It's like, well, no, wait a second. There are so many different kinds of shoes. You can get, shoes with heels, shoes with soft heels, shoes with this, shoes with that. It's like you wouldn't go and say, well, I don't like shoes anymore. Or like if you go to a really hard yoga class or whatever, you've got to find what feels right to you. And TM, some people love TM. Some people just, transcendental meditation. Some people love it. For them, it's just like, And, I think it's funny. I started getting into meditation, I don't know, 7 years ago, really, really practicing it, like actively practicing it, because I went to this Deepak Chopra thing and we did it 5 times a day for a week. And, we sat on the floor and we had a word and we went through this whole process and it was all really organized. And I loved it. When I was there doing it 5 times a day for 5 days, it was like, this is great. I had no job. I was on vacation, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
It was great, right? Well, I came home and slowly I gravitated from sitting on the floor, which was kind of cold, to sitting in a chair. Pretty soon I started gravitating towards, well, I have my coffee. Who meditates with coffee? I do, and pretty soon it's like, this whole thing sometimes you hear about in mindfulness where, the thoughts come in and you dismiss them. Well, sometimes I have found that the thoughts come in, and that's the only time of day that I have to think about those thoughts. So I get up really early and I have my meditation, and I put that in air quotes practice, is more meditation, contemplation, reflection, and prayer. So and that's because that's mutated to that over time. So I might have a cup of coffee and I sort of begin by opening myself up to what are the thoughts, like what am I feeling? What are my thoughts? And I allow myself to sort of think through them. And it's almost like organizing my sock drawer. Because then once I've kind of organized those thoughts and been like, well, and then I'm able to do it, then I can go into kind of a more quiet contemplative space and be like, well, let me listen to, again, that sifting that we talked about earlier. But, I think that it's really hard for people to go from 90 miles an hour in their day to sort of like, oh, whoa, now I have 20 minutes of meditation. I must sit down and start to dismiss my thoughts.
Yeah, that's how it felt. I had a hard time chilling.
It's just, I think the idea of saying, I'm going to do 20 minutes of something that brings me peace and relaxation is a nicer way to open the doors of possibility, because that might be, let me go for a walk, let me water the plants, let me sit outside, let me pet my cat, let me do a little yoga, let me stretch, let me read, let me have a cup of tea, let me space out looking out of the window. Like, what gives you that sense that, I love Louise Hay. She talks about prosperity and that feeling of you can be prosperous in time, you can be prosperous in wisdom, you can be prosperous in all these different ways. What gives you that feeling of peace? What gives you that feeling of, I'm tending to myself, I'm taking care of me? What gives you that feeling? And it may be TM, but it may be a lot of other things. So, and maybe there'll be a time in your life, well, that TM really feels right. Let me bring it back. Or it may just be like, check that box wasn't the right thing. So just give yourself the freedom to experiment. But the most important thing is giving yourself that time to just find what that thing is.
These are all so wise. So what do you what do you know that you wish other people could know?
What do I wish? That's another good question. I think that I spent so long chasing, thinking that if I worked hard enough, or, it's just the cliches, like I felt like I always had this hole in myself, like that I was going to feel better if I could fill that hole, with the right titles or the right job or the right money or the right clothes or the right this or the right that. And that, instead of trying to run away or fill the hole, just to allow myself to feel that and sort of go into the place rather than running away from it, and that's brought me so much more peace, because that when you start to examine, well, what's inside, another book, I love these classic books, and there's a reason why they're classics, is The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer, because he does this extraordinary description of the mind and the monkey mind that we call it. Mm-hmm. And he also talks about getting to this place where you start to sense this presence. And I feel like that's, allowing yourself to develop a practice where you start to feel, this sort of sense of presence or other or universe or God, whatever you want to talk about, like starting to tap into that. That's an amazing, delicious journey. So highly recommend that.
I love that. How can people find you, Anne?
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. What a beautiful question. Soul Candy. That is really where I'm putting my time and effort and energy. So anybody could just go soulcandy.com, sign up, free newsletter. And then that way, once I start to upload these long form videos and podcasts, they will just be the recipient of those. And then also once I launch the site, a little more in-depth site, there's also an area there where you can share your story with me, because I would love to hear people's stories. Absolutely. Because, I don't want to just be like emanating things out from Soul Candy. It's really a relationship. So absolutely. Anybody who wants to write to me can also write to me at ann@soulcandy.com. So
I love that.
Yeah. Thank you.
And this was so exciting. I love this. I feel like I am taking tons of notes. And I just got, answers to life's biggest questions. So thank you.
You are just a beautiful, beautiful podcaster. You have a presence about you, and you ask such great questions. So
and I'm going to virtually hug you.
Virtual hug right back. This is totally COVID,
COVID friendly. Right.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. Thank you for the work that you're doing. Thank you for asking such beautiful questions. And thank you for just allowing me an opportunity. I'm just really,
oh my God. Really Anne, I'm so excited you said yes. I didn't know if I'd ever get to you because it was like shrouded in I don't know.
You're very sweet. Well, thank you very much. I'm so glad we aligned.
It's going to be awesome.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Man, I felt like Anne was a kindred spirit and so interesting and insightful. One thing I'm learning is that finding your purpose is almost never a lightning bolt like you see in the movies, but it is a journey. So if you're in one of those dips right now and trying to dig out and thinking, is this ever going to end? I so get it. Maybe the acknowledgement that it is a process will help you know that one day soon, it will all just click and you'll know why. I've linked Anna Alexandra's info as well as my own in the show notes. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next week.